All right. Um, Time to do some reaction content on um, the Iraq War.
React.
All right. So let's. I figured this is a great place to start.
Jesus.
Oh God, this is gonna be awful.
Fuck.
Who's the guest?
What the fuck?
Yeah.
How do you do that post nut? How are you that mean post nut? How do you got that much fucking vinegar in you?
I heard horrible
Yeah.
about the two sons were apparently like
Uday and
Kusai, like
Kusai.
full on serial.
And their
Game
dad.
of Thrones style serial killer.
Jesus Christ. I know they used to torture the Iraqi soccer team. They would like electrocute their nipples when they fucking didn't do well. There's so much pressure
Those
on
two sons. I think there was a docu or a film about the two sons. Isn't there? Is there a Uday and Kusai film? They were supposed to.
Well, good news. Coming to
Evil
ABC, it's two brothers. Instead of sitcom. Two brothers that do whatever the hell they want.
Can you imagine your dad was Tommy saying?
Yeah, dude.
Devil's Double.
What is? You put it on?
Well,
Is that a fictional or is it a documentary?
Dude, that
I
is.
believe it's
Is that a fictional or is that a documentary?
Jesus Christ.
I hope it doesn't kill me.
Are we just misremembering the Devil's
How'd the
Double?
national team
yeah,
do?
this is
Remember that guy in Devil's Double? Fact-based
Fact-based.
drama. Iraqi Lieutenant Yahya is forcibly drafted into being a body double for Uday Hussein, Saddam Hussein's depraved elder son. Oh, wow. Oh, that's cool. When did that come out? Last year?
2011.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I remember hearing about that. But dude, I
Uday
would
was
love
so
that's like Uday Hussein's like a guy where you're like, I'll do a deep dive. I'll go learn about your crazy ass.
Pull up an article on how evil they were. Let's see if you can find something. It was
Pull up an article of how
terrifying
evil
shit,
they
man.
were.
Oh, by the way, those Donner Party
Yeah,
stats.
look at that. Uday, career of rape, torture, and murder.
Just to fact check myself, those Donner Party stats. I don't know if that's
Yeah, pull up the video where they actually kill people on camera at a wedding.
Oh yeah, there was a
Yeah, pull up. There's video of a lot of this, guys. Pull that up. Put that on the Joe Rogan show.
Felt right. I just want to let you know.
I was looking stuff up about it.
But one of the first things that I saw about the Iraq War, I forgot what they call these films. They're like but they're like exploitation films.
Gonzo
you know?
films?
No, they're like Mondo or something.
Mondo. No wait.
So-
Yeah, Mondo
So
films.
it was like that, and it was like early in the, it was like maybe 2003 2004, and it was called like Buried in the Sand or something, and it's just like because like we recovered a lot of tapes and stuff like that, so it's like people getting their hands cut off and like all this stuff, and then like it starts transitioning into like this weird Zionist stuff about like how it's like the destiny to like liberate the Middle East and stuff. But like I saw this probably like, you know, because like I would probably be in 8th grade at the time, and it was just like straight up like fucking like, you know, just snuff films and stuff like that. You couldn't really get online and see a lot of that stuff at the time, but like a lot of news broadcasts actually aired some of this shit. There's one I've showed Jack it before. They handcuff a guy and throw him off a building, but it's a small building. It's only like a few stories up, like maybe 3 stories up. You remember that, Jack? And it's like you can tell like he's gonna live, but like obviously like he broke something when they threw him off of that building. And like a lot of stuff like that. There's videos of like them like just straight up like people lining up, taking off their shoes to get their feet caned in the army and stuff. Like there's so much video of this. Pull it up, Joe.
There's a lot of info on
I just
it,
toss it out. Nate always calls me on it. He's like, "Is that soda fact?" And you're like, "Yeah, it's soda." Yeah, dude.
Christ.
These guys, if you're Uday Hussein and your dad is Saddam just running shit, you're gonna feel very empowered to be a fucking psycho.
Look at this. Hold on. Search for public appropriation appears to have taken over in the mid 1980s when Uday first took a close interest in the sport. Footballers say he never really understood or showed much interest in the game itself, but was desperate enough for a win that he would phone up the dressing room during halftime to threaten to cut off players' legs and throw them to ravenous dogs.
Just in between it, and they go, "Hey,
This
Uday's on
one's
the
for
phone.
you.
Uday's on the phone. Uday's on the phone for you." And you're like, "Hello? I'll cut your fucking legs off."
And feed them to ravenous dogs. As football overseer, Uday kept a private torture scorecard with written instructions on how many times each player should be beaten on the soles of his feet after a particularly poor showing. He also carried a grudge. Once you came to Uday's notice, he never left you alone. The only time I managed to get away from his eyes was when I went outside Iraq. Star performer Habib Jafar told The Guardian last April. Fuck, dude.
Damn, dude, read that next one.
Oh, Uday's excesses carried over into his private life, where he had a reputation for ordering any girl or woman who caught his eye to be brought to his private pleasure dome.
Pleasure Dome, dude, which sounds so fun to get invited to.
Jesus
If you're like, dude, do you want
Christ.
to come to my Pleasure Dome? You're like, yeah, absolutely. And he's like, it's not good. It's Uday Hussein's Pleasure Dome.
They should bring up the part where he'd sort of just steal wives.
That's the thing. Is it's like I thought this was going to be about Saddam. Like I've heard so much about like his sons and like stealing women and like raping them and then killing them right after. Like, I've heard so much about that, but like nobody ever
Well,
talks
dude,
about like the genocide or like the ecological destruction of the South.
The fucked up part is like Saddam didn't even like his sons.
Oh yeah,
He didn't
That's-
even like. He was like,
that
"Fuck these
HBO thing, The
guys."
House of
He's like,
Saddam, it's
"Fuck
great
these-"
because like you can tell how much he hates his sons in that.
He was like,
He
"Fuck
actually
these
likes his
guys."
daughter.
Yeah.
Now this might get us flagged.
Is this a lobjet?
Yeah. Uh-oh, come on. Don't even want to fuck with music. Okay. I think that's enough of that. Now, hopefully this is the video. I think it is right here. We're going to need to change the layout to over here. So if this should be them just basically confessing to all the crimes that you just saw.
من هذا الرجل العظيم الأب يقول رعاية العوائل المخربين والكذا والمدري ايش القيادة العامة يجيبوا لي اياه وتيجي على لكن رعايتهم ألفنهم بشكرا هاي رعايتهم ومنعوهم بالتلفزيون هذول سلموا يعني راح اخليهم طيبين يا اخي وما نحطهم هذا البشر كلهم
Jesus.
ولهناك من هنا البوكلينات تدزها والشغلات
And that's not all. There's lots. You can Human Rights Watch has an entire article where it's just audio recordings of them in their own words saying what they're doing. Um, there's a very specific one where Chemical Ali is basically saying that he's going to kill him with chemical weapons, and the international community isn't going to do shit about it. And he was right, because they didn't do anything about it, really, at the end of the day. And that's the real issue people should have. You know,
Isn't chemical weapons like the other war crimes that they have to be brought by the country, not by other people?
No, I actually
No?
don't. I don't know.
the only one that the thing is, that's only for genocide, because it says that you're supposed, well, there's certain things, a lot of war crimes you're supposed to prosecute yourself, but it doesn't always, like the Hague exists for a reason. But like, so like the fact that Iraq was able to try all of the war criminals themselves, like that's a big deal. You know, like the ex-leader of Sudan, for example, like he is not on trial in Sudan. He's in the International Criminal Court because they don't have the ability to host a trial themselves. This is something that we need to look at right now, because these camps with ISIS fighters, right? We need the UN literally won't do anything because northern East Syria is not a country, right? So they refuse to do anything. They've washed their hands completely of the crisis.
Well, okay, kind of a bit more into a hypothetical here with the whole, like the ISIS fighters in the camps and whatnot. There's two things I want to get on. It's one is the foreign fighters, wouldn't it just, obviously, like this is kind of the big question with the whole issue, like in El Hol camp and all that. Wouldn't it be better just to send the foreign fighters back to their countries so they can be tried? And then
Yes,
more
that's
so why more so why can't more so
repatriation
why
is a
but
big
like
deal.
more so
Like there's
more so
who's the British girl?
my question though is like, why can't they do that? Like, why is that so hard?
Well,
They-
who's
they
that British
can't.
girl?
They can.
Shamina Begum.
Okay, I've met her. Like I did an interview with her. And
Okay.
In
like
Syria?
among other people in those camps, you know, a lot of people who are Western, like English speaking people, because I was only working in English, right? So like at the time I probably didn't think anything of it, you know, but like over time faces like stick out to you. And so like the issue with a lot of these things is that this whole thing where they're like not giving her citizenship, they act like she's not going to go to prison. Like she bought and sold people. She was part of that, you know? You can say that she was groomed, you can say that she was naive, but at the end of the day, she participated in slavery. Like that's a big fucking deal. And having her rot in this camp is not doing anything about it. Like it's the UK's responsibility. It's their citizens, right?
If you're revoking her citizenship, it's just a cop out, right? It's saying, hey, we don't have to deal with her. She's not a citizen. She can just stay there. It's the whole thing. They're basically all of the countries who have foreign fighters are basically choosing to leave them in these camps rather than taking them home to deal with them themselves.
I just saw a thing recently where two like Norwegian women of Somali descent, I guess, were I think they've been sent back to Norway for trial. I don't know if they've been sent back to Norway or if they were arrested in Syria, but I'm pretty sure they were sent back to Norway
There's
for trial.
certain countries that are better than others. Britain
Yeah,
is by
for
far
sure.
the worst, though.
Oh, yeah.
Also, a lot of ISIS fighters from Britain. It's insane. It is fucking.
Yeah, it's kind of
crazy.
ridiculous. I mean, it makes sense, but it's also kind of ridiculous. But like my second point on that is like, okay, let's say, you know, the people who are like hosting these prisons, YPG, SDF, technically not their own country, right? But what's to keep them from like putting these people on trial?
So,
And,
Iraq
like-
has taken a lot of prisoners back.
Right,
So
yeah.
Iraq is cool, really cool. But the thing is that the Kurds wouldn't release those prisoners unless Iraq guaranteed that they wouldn't get the death penalty.
Oh, Well, dude, that's the thing with Iraq. They're willing to take these prisoners back. A big reason because they like retribution. You know, they want to make them pay.
But
So
still,
there's
kind of a big
no
deal.
There's no universe where like the YPG SDF would be okay with the death penalty for these people.
No, and it comes down to just the standards of justice that they believe in. You know,
Right.
like they eventually, they're the type of people that they actually really hate the camps. They see it as a big contradiction to their revolution. Because they believe that these people should go back to their own countries and hopefully get another chance at life. They should like pay for their crimes,
Yeah. I mean, and also it's just like a shit show logistically.
Yeah, but the thing is the League of Nations actually used to work with nations. Like the Iroquois almost became a recognized state in the League of Nations.
Yeah.
Right, and Winston Churchill blocked that, and who did the Dutch became who? Norway?
Fucking British.
The Netherlands. So the Netherlands were the ones who were their sponsors. So it's just like today with NATO, with Turkey blocking shit and things like that. So the UN is specifically designed because they had issues with people being like, oh, we're a sovereign country inside America, right? The League of Nations had an issue with that, especially with Britain. So it gave all these people pathways to independence. So when they made the United Nations, it's ironically called the United Nations, but it only works with states. And that's the big issue here, is that the UN structure is not set up for things that need to be coming, right? So like, for example, northern Iraq, right? Iraqi Kurdistan is a sovereign state at this point. Like, and you have to ask the question, does somebody need to have their own economy to be a sovereign state? Well, here, like, a lot of people are sovereign nations here, and they still use US dollars. They have their own tax system and all that stuff. They kind of have an independent internal economy, but they're still on US dollars. So you have to ask the question is like, do you need an independent economy to consider yourself independent? Anyway, maybe the chinchillas will quiet down after
it's a very interesting question
some of this.
Though.
Huh?
It's a very interesting question nonetheless.
Yeah.
Like, what's the line?
Oh boy, this is gonna be fun.
Now,
World's one of the top 10 dickhead intellectuals of the 21st century.
Only
Bro, do you see that at Four Horsemen? Do you remember that shit?
Oh my god, what was it? It was
You remember
him,
that shit?
Harris, Dawkins, and the other greasy-looking motherfucker.
Jesus.
Everybody knows why they oppose it, don't they? Everyone's clear on what their reasons are. We were told wrong things. We were given inaccurate information by
Real quick, what year is this?
I think I'm not sure. I'll check in a minute. But is it lagging for you? Because I saw a little connection error for me.
I'm good.
Okay, cool.
We were sort of cheated into a feeling that our delegations of the UN had overstated the matter of weapons of mass destruction and terrorism. In fact, when you think about it, you'll find that it's probably even wrong to mention Saddam Hussein in the same breath as weapons of mass destruction or terrorism. I have a couple of tests of my own for whether people know what they're talking about when they're talking about
But they found them.
Anyone who says that Saddam Hussein was, a bad guy, doesn't know what they're talking about. You hear that said quite a lot. They don't know. They don't know what fascism feels like. They don't know what it's like to see families forced at gunpoint to applaud the torture and execution in public of their family members. They don't know what it's like to see 180,000.
Can we hit the pause button? Can we hit the pause button for a second?
Christopher Hitchens also does not know what this is like. Just want to point that out.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. But the other thing I wanted to get to on the just because the weapons of mass destruction is going to get brought up a lot anytime we talk about Iraq. I think something we got to realize is not that it's more so that he didn't have weapons of mass destruction, but like the bar, like what was set as weapons of mass destruction. I think it was missiles that could go past like could hit range at a certain number of kilometers, like somewhere between 60 and 120 kilometers. I can't remember the exact number. So,
well, anyway,
killed by poison gas in the northern provinces of Iraq. They don't know what it's like to see at least that number of Shia Arabs killed in southern Iraq. They don't know what it took Anglo-American
Did I just cut out there?
American policy to put it
Yeah,
over
you
like
did.
1991
Yeah.
onwards,
Okay.
and of the United Nations, abolishing it, annexing it, making it part of Iraq. They didn't hear the speech from Saddam Hussein saying the only mistake he ever made was that he invaded Kuwait before he'd finished the nuclear weapon. He should have done it the other way around. First, get the nuclear weapon, the Tuwaitha reactor, which we found as a result of the Kuwait War when we went looking for it. Get the bomb first, then invade Kuwait, then ask them what they're going to do now that I've invaded it. Don't do it, don't get it the wrong way around. We lived at this man's permission for a long time. We lived by his warrant. Only his stupidity allowed us to be as complacent as we were. And in the meantime, fighters in northern and southern Iraq were fighting against a tyrant we should have been fighting ourselves. The liberation of Iraq, in other words, the decision that we had to move the Iraqi people and the region into a post-Saddam era, will stand, I'm convinced, as one of the greatest decisions of American statecraft, as one of the things that American soldiers, male and female, and politicians who voted for it, those who've defended it, will be proudest of in the future of any decision we've ever made. Despite the
Oh boy.
incompetence, despite the failures, despite the disappointments, let us review what we've
3
done.
minutes in, we're already aging badly.
State of the Middle East from the control and sole ownership of a psychopathic crime family who owned all of Iraq and treated its people as if.
like I was saying earlier, he's putting his respect on his name, recognizing that they're a fucking crime family, bro. You know, like you got to put respect on how gangster this dude fucking was. Like he was a hard motherfucker. But this whole thing about being proud, like first of all, I would say that like I think objective viewpoints might change on something. Like more people will see, you know, it's kind of like obviously the collapse of the Soviet Union wasn't good, right? Like it fucked up a lot of people's lives. But if you then look a little bit later, then a lot of people start to say that it's like, oh, our lives are better because the Soviet Union fell. You know, and I could see somebody making that kind of argument, but to think that it's going to be the greatest decision we ever made, come on. How much of your own farts do you sniff, my dude?
Was his whole brand, rest in piss. But what was it? Shit, there was something that I wanted, before I cut out, I wanted to get back to the whole WMD thing, because it's not so much that they weren't there, but it's because the line set was so like ridiculous by modern military standards that it's like, of course he has weapons of mass destruction, like every competent military does. Or would I be like incorrect in saying that?
Yeah, you'd be right. Especially if you just have like, if you have chemical weapons, then you have WMDs. I mean, yes, if you have a bunch of them, chlorine gas and mustard gas shells.
Yeah,
sure,
it was really weird stuff, because they like the UN was getting into stuff about like, again, like I said earlier, missiles that could shoot past a certain range, and it's like Iraq at its height was like the 4th largest army in the world. Of course, they're gonna have missiles that could shoot past like a certain range in the 1990s, 21st century, whatever. Like it was I can't remember, again, like I said earlier, can't remember the exact number, something between 60 and 120 kilometers, but I would believe that every army within like, you know, the top 10 on the firepower scale has missiles that can do that.
Yeah.
Has had missiles that can do that, like dating back to maybe like the 80s even.
Yeah. It's sort of like, it's like saying, if you have these sorts of missiles, like Scud missiles, then you have weapons of mass destruction. Well, we already know
Basically.
Iraq has Scud missiles, so it's sort of like saying, no matter what, Iraq has WMDs, so this war is pre facto justified.
It's like saying you have a sports car if your car can reach 100 miles per hour. It's like, yeah, no shit. But like my Nissan Altima is not a sports car.
I've had DaVinci Resolve open this whole time. Like, man.
Oh shit, that'll do it. Yeah.
So,
It's a power.
while that's closing, I'm going to see if I can share this screenshot I have here. So I have a few of these, but this right here, ignore the left side because it's like took a screenshot on two monitors. But as you can see here, this is literally a report. Like this is a chemical weapons report declassified by the government. These are public information. Anyone can find these. And I have a few of them, like I said. This is not the most interesting one. So as I pull those up, just fill some time because I don't want to have these chinchillas running around in the background while I pull it up.
So apparently, as I mentioned, during the whole evacuation debacle from Afghanistan, a bunch of guys in the terror watch list, people who were fingerprinted for either doing low-level jihad or low-level Taliban activities in the sense that they were just taking pot shots at convoys, and DoD was sort of like, "All right, you guys, just please stop. We'll fingerprint you. We're not going to do anything else. Yeah, we'll just sort of arrest you. We're not going to arrest you, but we have your fingerprints. Please don't do this again." As well as 50 other fingerprints for guys who were on who were actually IED assembling guys, right? So 324 of them flew to the U.S. during the evacuation. So 324 guys in the terror watch list. So only 50 of those guys are actually in prison right now. The other ones are just sort of floating around. The guys who were confirmed to be IED manufacturers are the guys who are in supermaxes awaiting sort of his sentencing.
That's
The
cool.
other guys are like just around. And Senator Josh Hawley received a whistleblower report to this effect, but he's going to sit on it until the midterms because he's a fucking idiot. But the FBI and the other federal agencies has no idea where these guys are, right? So there's just sort of vibing in the U.S. 250 guys in the terror watch list. Like that seems like a problem, right?
Well, it depends on how they're communicating because a lot of times, like these people know that they just got to lay low for a few months.
Yeah.
So it might be that kind of issue, but this document right here, like it says right in here, like historical context, Iraq purchased thousands of empty artillery shells, smoke and chemicals, and like it's saying like it says 500 mustard filled rounds right here. So like these rounds totally existed, right? And like I have even more documents that are like actual like the CIA reports and stuff, but it's like a whole like PDF that I have to comb through. And they're saying specifically, they're pointing out because these are logs. Every time we found a chemical weapon, this is public information because they've declassified it all now. So we've actually found tons of chemical weapons, but the thing is that if you look at like the CIA report, like it'll just say right in there, it's like none of these are what we're looking for because they weren't manufactured after, like basically that they were taken out the chemical capabilities. These are all old rounds. They're not new manufacturing and things like that. So he actually wasn't pursuing chemical rounds at the time, and I honestly think he didn't need to because we had to think about the conditions he's under at the time, right? So this is like kind of the part you can kind of blame on the West too with the sanctions and stuff, is that the he was left in a defeated state, so he had to control his own empire. It's much like like Putin, like after the Soviet Union fell, they needed a strong man like Putin to come in to start bringing things together in Russia, and it's scenarios like that happen. So this right here is actually, as you can see, this is a sarin lab. All right, this is a real lab, one of the biggest I've ever seen. Like if you look at this center picture, it looks like they're fucking building a Frankenstein in there. It's insane, So our episode on Iraq, the guy who's up, he's up, and it's not him specifically, but his like like his whole like unit, like he was associated with finding a lot of these chemical rounds because a lot of the chemical munitions were made in the north, right? So the thing is that these chemicals didn't exist in Iraq until we invaded, right? And there's only one possible place where they might have, and it's like you have to be extremely trusting of what the US government says to buy this story. But it's a great story at the same time because it actually did happen. On the invasion, one of the first missions we do with the Kurds, they fight Kurdish Al Qaeda, right? And apparently there's a chemical base that they're going after here that Kurdish Al Qaeda is running. They have a chemical weapons lab on this base, but it's basically at the top of a mountain. So you
Wait.
have these.
Wait, dial this back. Kurdish Al Qaeda.
Yeah, Kurdish Al Qaeda.
So
We talked about them before.
A lot of Kurds are Islamists, like a lot.
Yeah, Kurdish Al Qaeda is actually kind of based. It's a
Oh,
long
alright.
story. It's a long story,
I'll take
right?
your word for it.
So they're basically at the top of a mountain, right? So I think it's called Operation Viking Hammer. You know, it's like special forces thing. It's Delta. It's like the Marines or something like that. But they're trying to position mortar teams, right? And the Kurds are so fast at scaling this mountain that they can't place the mortars fast enough to like cover the Kurds, right? So these Kurds are just storming up this mountain because it's like it's tribal stuff, you know. It's more about that to them. And then apparently the base that they were going after at the top, they accidentally basically destroyed it. And they said they found evidence that nerve agent was being produced there, and there was blueprints for making nerve agent there. So it was more about getting the trust of the Kurds. It was an important operation for that. But Dick Cheney will tell you that they're like, if you ask Dick Cheney, I think we'll source this, and I think Colin Powell might as well. They'll say, well, actually, we did find chemical weapons, and they'll cite this specific battle. But it's actually like, if you like military history, it's a great battle to read about just because of like the coordination between the two units and things like that. So if you're a military nerd, check it out. Anyway, I'm going to hit play now.
Sunni Wahhabi theocracy of Saudi Arabia and the no less exorbitant Shia theocracy of Iran. But it is the keystone that allows us, yes, us, we who have the right.
Oh, but
We have the right
buzzword
to-
one,
no,
Wahhabi,
have to
not a
restrict
thing.
enriching oil
But
industry practice and democracy, to say, if we can recuperate Iraq, if we can recuperate its oil industry, if we can stop it being the private property of a psychopathic crime family, we can not only help the Iraqis, but we can undercut the monopoly or the duopoly of Shia Iran and Wahhabi Saudi Arabia. Does anyone think this is a matter of indifference? Is anyone willing to get up and say, you, sir, very good for you. I admire your nerve. I wouldn't mind if you were the only one, as you seem to be. You're indifferent to it. The rest of us here, voters and consumers, all believers in.
I thought this was called Christopher Hitchens Destroys All Popular Arguments Against the Iraq War. Are these popular arguments, my dude?
Freedom might possibly want to take.
If you overthink
They
things.
can't be for us.
I feel like even if you're a fan of Hitchens, you just gotta admit this is just not one of his brightest moments. I mean,
Yeah.
he doesn't have many, but like this like stands out in particular. Like even if you love this guy, right? Like
Business flourishes, the press flourishes, democracy flourishes, civil society flourishes. The sooner, the earlier the intervention by the British and American forces in Iraq, in other words, the happier, the sooner, the greater.
Like after Halabja, right? Like after that, right? There should have been interference there, right? And it should have just ended there. You know, why did it continue after that? So you're arguing for the sooner the intervention happens, the better. Well, where was the intervention when it should have been happening? There would have been a legitimate reason then, right? There wasn't. They wouldn't have to make up a bullshit thing.
The deeper, the more enduring, and the more useful in the future is the outcome. I'm willing to defend, because I've just seen time, I'm willing to defend and underline and repeat and restate and emphasize everything I've said so far. So all of you who've come here under the pathetic illusions peddled by Hillary Clinton, Harry Reid, and MoveOn.org have all your work still ahead of you. And you thought it was going to be easy, didn't you? Bye now. Everybody knows there isn't a single clever person here who doesn't know, is there? Or watching this on a webcast, who doesn't know that you can't mention weapons of mass destruction and Saddam in the same breath, even though he used them against Iran. And
let's see if we don't have to pause here because we covered everything.
And was continuing to incubate and maintain the capacity to recover them. However, for actuarial purposes, let me just say that having enforced the resolutions that governed this question in the case of Iran, we forced the capitulation of Colonel Gaddafi, whose stock of WMD we had underestimated.
Gaddafi didn't have chemical weapons. We know this for a fact. It was all a ruse. He was making threats about weapons that he didn't actually have, because that's what you have to do. You
Gaddafi
have to
moment.
act tough.
Gaddafi moment. Classic Gaddafi.
When he came in, and he didn't surrender, I might add, to Kofi Annan or Jacques Chirac. Where did Colonel Gaddafi come a few weeks after the fall of Baghdad to say, okay, you can take all my stockpile now and put it in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where it now is, which is where it should have been?
There was no stockpile. Also, you know what else Gaddafi did? He immediately was like reaching out and being like, wow, 9/11 was fucked up. Like, you know, like if you want to kill Saddam together, I'm down. And the Americans were like, what? And then he was like, oh, nothing. Anyway, that was fucked up, right?
Didn't come from Kofi Annan.
Classic Gaddafi. Again,
Of course.
classic.
He's the wild card, man. That's the thing is like there was a lot of stuff you can't deny. We're good things, you know.
Comrades, I
And
know-
then he gets up in front of the Arab League in 2008, and he's all worried about what happened to Saddam. He's like, "It could happen to any of us, guys." Like,
Yeah, and then what happened to Gaddafi scared the shit out of everyone else.
But thanks for trying. I sort of appreciate it. You can come to Kofi Annan or Jacques Chirac or the prostituted, equally prostituted Gerhard Schroeder, the real blood for oil pimps and prostitutes who constituted the leadership of the anti-war movement in European politics. No, you came to Tony Blair and you came to George Bush. I give up. Okay, let's have a look at this big stockpile that Colonel Gaddafi's got all this time. It's bigger than we thought, much bigger than we thought. We accused him of a lot. It was much worse than we thought, as it had been with Saddam Hussein at the time of Kuwait, much worse than we thought. Well, let's have another look. Where's he got it from? Where's it come from? It's come from North Korea. And it's come from Pakistan, our ally. So by walking back the cat, as it's called in Washington, we discover from this capitulation the AQ Khan network. We shut it down, or at least we put its leader under house arrest, at least for now. At least we put the North Koreans in the frame, and they know we've got them. This is the biggest non-proliferation victory there has ever been for any US administration ever in history. That's the first thing. The second is we catch the guy who rolled Leon Klinghoffer off the deck of a cruise ship in the Mediterranean, who avoided arrest when he was caught, had to be released, because he was traveling on a diplomatic passport. A what passport? A what passport? A diplomatic passport. What diplomatic passport? An Iraqi diplomatic passport. Just like Abu Nidal.
okay, I'm kind of just waiting for when Hitchens like says we should just bomb every Muslim majority country on the planet. Like,
To be headquartered in Baghdad. We shut that down too. You think this is nothing? You think it's nothing. You want to sneer at it and say, Bush says mission accomplished? Sneer. Go on, sneer. These achievements are.
What exactly is a sneer?
I think it's like a leering
I'm
gesture.
sure a lot of people when they saw the
It lowers.
Yeah,
I think
it's
it
like-
lowers
it's like
the
when Bush
opponent
got up on there.
Pokemon defense by 10.
Real. There are four reasons for which a state, previously sovereign, may lose its sovereignty, may be deemed to be outside the law. They are four. I'll recite them quickly. One, violations of the Genocide Convention, which we have signed. And by the way, by all means, let's impose this on Sudan.
Okay, well, where were you during the Anfal genocide then?
And by all means, let's impose it on them for Darfur and on China for many other offenses too, because just as
Oh, what was that about Darfur? Because that was caused by oil companies, my dude. Like, what are we talking about there?
China has backed Saddam Hussein, and just as it backs Robert Mugabe, and just as it's backed the worst elements in Burma, so it has been.
Is this a China bad? Is that what that was? That was all for China bad? China back Darfur? China back Darfur? Are you fucking kidding me? We trained child soldiers in Ethiopia to fight the Sudanese government. Are you fucking kidding me? We still use those child soldiers today in Yemen. What the fuck are you talking about?
Pop off, sis.
Been behind many of our woes in the Middle East. So that's the first thing. The Genocide Convention may not be violated.
Wait,
Signed it.
pause again.
Mandates you must move.
For the common audience, which child soldiers? You're talking the John G. Reed?
Okay, so,
Yeah,
so,
I was just gonna say you should
we actually have
expand
a
on that a
great
little
article on this. We actually have a great article on this. It's called "The Child Soldiers of the African Horn." So if you go to Google, you can type in "Child Soldiers of the African Order" or African Horn, and it's actually an outlook on how there's actually two sides to child soldiers, and it presents actually ethical arguments for child soldiers, and then like how the United States is nowhere near those ethics. and that their use is completely unethical, and like how the president actually has the direct authority, just the president. So we have laws in place to block the use of child soldiers, but the president has the authority to just say, okay, we'll allow child soldiers here. So like we have it
Just
with
like
Saudi Arabia, things like that. We can
link
just
it.
have a carve out anytime. He can just say, okay, carve out, boom. We can now work with a country with child soldiers.
Just
So
like link it here
during
or
the
some
Derg
shit.
regime, we backed camps, and they were done by the leader of the Dinka tribe. What's his fucking name? Slavakur, right? So leader of Slavakur, his army. So those, it wasn't just child soldiers, but there was a separate camp specifically for the children, and they were refugees from South Sudan, right, that were taken in by Ethiopia, and they were put into a camp that's only for boys. And so there's a connection between these camps and the training of child soldiers that were then used in Sudan, because at the time Sudan was enemy number 2 behind Iran, right? And then they were perfectly right to think this, because at the time Al Qaeda was there. But the main reason this was happening is because of oil. Like, it's just a fact that the oil companies are behind a lot of this. The oil companies were the ones financing a lot of these like child soldier camps, and like they were the ones like paying people to go kill people. And like today there's still child soldiers in South Sudan, and it's totally fucked up, and it totally is wrapped up completely with America. Like and that's the thing, is like nobody looks at this. But so at the same time, the TPLF, the first generation of them, they're fighting the Derg regime, and they overthrow the Derg regime, and like all the child soldiers in their like army actually were given better lives because they had access to like education and all this stuff that they wouldn't have access to. So it's like it gets to the point where it's like, if you have no access to your education or anything like that, like the only choice you have is like, to defend yourself. Like when is it okay for a child to start defending themselves? And it gets into that type of ethics behind it. But at the same time, literally, they're fighting child soldiers backed by America.
Oh, wait, and the John Jaweed portion, it's probably important to bring up. Gaddafi's mini-meat, Haftar.
We actually talk about Haftar a lot here.
Oh my God, that guy
we
is
cover
a
him a lot
train
on a
wreck.
lot of our shows, so you can learn all about Haftar. Talk about him in the Greece episode a lot.
He hired a bunch of John Jaweed.
A bunch of what?
He hired a bunch of.
That sounds like. Yeah, that's definitely something he's done. Yep.
The child soldiers.
He'll take any tribal militia and just be like, "You're the guys."
The point, but he's like talking about like he said brought up Mugabe, so he's talking about the Second Congo War, and it's like, dog, more than China is involved there. Like literally, like these conflicts, these really really horrid conflicts. Like for example, Yemen is a horrid conflict because because there's multiple like global like powers involved in that conflict, and it's over resources. Those are the wars that really get fucked up, and they try to not give you any news about them.
Move to punish or prevent genocide. Second, a regime loses its sovereignty if it violates the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Iraq has used weapons of mass destruction on its own territory and on the territory of others. Third, you may lose your sovereignty.
Who gave them those weapons?
If you give aid, comfort, and harbor to international terrorist groups. Iraq is multiply convicted of this. And fourth, for occupying and invading the territory.
By the way, James, the John Jaweed goes by like a rebranded name now. They're called the Rapid Support Forces now. That's
a great name. It's
something they've been going by lately. I just felt like that would be fun to put in there, because John Jaweed in Arabic actually is demon riders or demons on horses.
Oh,
and it's just funny that they rebranded from like one sick name to another.
They poured a little Blackwater.
But yeah, go on. Yeah, like Blackwater, they're just like, we just need a sick name.
The case with all the despots we'd like to get rid of. The cheap point that Peter ends with, saying, if you're going to do Saddam Hussein, don't you have to do anybody, must reach the critical standard I've just mentioned. The four great offenses: repeated, flagrant, gross, and intentional, and going to be repeated, all of them again. It was essential that we move Iraq and the region into a post-Saddam Hussein era and the woes that have fallen upon us, the second thoughts we're bound to have, the worries about the blunders that we made while doing it, none of which I would deny, and some of which I know more about than you could dare to know. I know things about what went wrong that would curl your hair. Still, none of these can impeach the idea that we did it not too soon, but much too late, and that only therein lies our shame. Thank you.
Okay, I agree. If that's what he ends with, I agree. Okay, all that to him for him to actually make a good point about why America sucks dick.
Yeah, fair.
I don't know enough to comment.
This one is one of my favorites. This is Cheney, 1994.
Do you think that the U.S. or UN forces should have moved into Baghdad?
No.
Why not?
Because if we'd gone to Baghdad, we would have been all alone. There wouldn't have been anybody else with us. It would have been a U.S. occupation of Iraq. None of the Arab forces that were willing to fight with us in Kuwait were willing to invade Iraq. Once you got to Iraq and took it over and took down Saddam Hussein's government, then what are you going to put in its place? That's a very volatile part of the world. And if you take down the central government in Iraq, you can easily end up seeing pieces of Iraq fly off. Part of it the Syrians would like to have to the west. Part of eastern Iraq, the Iranians would like to claim, fought over for 8 years. In the north, you've got the Kurds. And if the Kurds spin loose and join with the Kurds in Turkey, then you threaten the territorial integrity of Turkey. It's a quagmire if you go that far and try to...
Interesting that you mentioned the Kurds.
Casualties. Everyone was impressed with the fact that we were able to do our job with as few casualties as we had. But for the 146 Americans killed in action and for their families, it wasn't a cheap war. And the question for the president, in terms of whether or not we went on to Baghdad and took additional casualties in an effort to get Saddam Hussein, was how many additional dead Americans is Saddam worth? And our judgment was not very many, and I think we got it right.
Oh, pause here for a second. How the fuck?
Oh, it's over.
How the fuck did he go from articulating such a well put and sophisticated argument, even though I don't necessarily agree with it, to fucking 9 years later saying, let's go invade Iraq with half as many guys, and completely ignoring all of the geopolitical considerations in mind that he just brought up?
So I just want to, over here, it says frequency. And as you can see, it says 25% to 34% of the troops in the Gulf War suffer from Gulf War illness. What is Gulf War illness? It's exposure to sarin. We know this for a fact. The military has gaslighted these people. We have Bernie Sanders talking about it when it happened. We know this happened. And it's because we didn't tell people the weapons they were destroying because we wanted to protect countries like Britain and Jordan, right? Because we wanted to try to deny the fact that the reason Saddam has these weapons is because of us, plain and simple. We gave him those weapons to use on the Ayatollah because just like how we committed war crimes to fucking take out Sudan in a fucking black covert war, the same thing we did with the Ayatollah.
Did not support the Gulf War in '91. And yet no one has been more vocal, it seems to me, in terms of being supportive of a war against Iraq than you have.
No, and here would be why I disagree with myself. And also, if I may, with just a line of your introduction, Charlie, where you said a war on Iraq, or even a war with, I forget
I
what
think
you
I
said.
said a war against Iraq is what I
war
said.
Against, yes. Well, actually, I'd criticize that even more. Let me mention a friend of mine.
Probably because I had to speed it up. That's why it was lagging before.
One part of Iraqi Kurdistan, who says the term he prefers is a war for Iraq. I would say at least we could say a war over Iraq or a war about Iraq.
Okay,
it's a quarrel. It's a quarrel with Saddam Hussein's regime, and there are many reasons I think why that
which is in control in Iraq today. So therefore,
yes, but let us look. I'm replying directly in a way to David here, to David Reed. Let's look at the bit of Iraq that is controlled by the Kurdish and Turkmen population. Exempt from Saddam's control and protected by the no-fly zones. Here you have 21 newspapers, several political parties, internet cafes, free travel, free trade. This is, by the way, in the most mountainous and tribal, and in some ways most backward part of the country. And over the last 10 or 11...
Bro. You did not just be like, by the way, these are backwards people, and they figured it out. They agree with me, these hillbillies over here.
It's Christopher Hitchens. What do you expect?
What is
I mean, he's not wrong. It's a tribal area, but that doesn't make them like backwards. If that makes sense. Like it's tribal, but that doesn't make them like.
Who's he calling backwards?
He's called,
everyone there is tribal. The Arabs in northern Iraq are tribal.
the Kurds in northern Iraq are tribal, but it doesn't make them like any less sophisticated, right? Like,
if we're gonna talk about like sophistication, I mean, just look at the South, right? The American South, it's just fucking backwards politically, not just like in the broad sweeping sense, but in like if you look at their policies, they're just fucking stupid, right? They don't make any fucking sense. And then there's no civilization isn't a mark of like progress or like intellectual ability. It's just fucking whatever.
and that whole line is also just very on brand for Christopher Hitchens. It's like, oh yes, these backwoods fucking savages agree with me. It's just like it's on brand.
And also, like, they tend to be like less Islamic in a lot of these places because you have a lot of the more like tribal oral religions that have been passed down and things like that in a lot of these places. So they have like a fusion of like a lot of different things, and like so there is like more of a diversity among these different governments that are just little tribal governments for a lot of these people. Like you even have like
Are you
Zoroastrians.
talking
up
about
there.
like the Kurdish tribal governments? Or are you just talking in general?
Well, mostly Kurdish but there is Zoroastrians as well, and but like there's a lot of interesting beliefs just kind of in that region that, and like even like just all the way from like Iran to like Lebanon, like that region, it's like the cultural fusion between like faiths and these like little minorities there can get like really really interesting and like complex and diverse. So the point is that it's slightly less Islamic, and that's probably why he likes them.
Yes, they've created
100% why he likes them.
That I think is pretty impressive. That's not therefore to be utopian to say no question that Iraq can do better than it's doing, or be done better by its friends and allies. I consider myself in this matter to be an ally of the Iraqi and Kurdish opposition, and I think that's being true to the same principles with which one was opposed to previous interventions there.
No, is this somehow you looked at a conclusion and you backed up to find reasons that you could make to arrive at that conclusion?
Well, I would feel very bad about myself if that's how I sounded. I'd rather just stand by what I just said. There's an irony here, if I can draw attention to one, though. A lot of people, I think in America as well as in the region, believe the United States is all-powerful. It's a common myth, as you know, throughout the Middle East. The United States is behind everything, and I'm afraid the idea of omnipotence has infected some of our policy intellectuals, too, and some of the people in the administration. They think what we say goes. The fact is that options are very limited at the moment in Iraq. Another disagreement with what David and what Michael Waltz has said. The collapse, the implosion of the Saddam Hussein regime is coming anyway. It's coming like Christmas. We're going to very soon to be faced, whatever we do, with all the ghastly consequences of a post-Saddam Iraq, which will include, indeed, Sunni-Shia rivalry, other regional rivalries, the possible intervention of neighboring countries, revenge killing, innumerable unpleasant possibilities. But they do include also the possibility I just mentioned, that of a more democratic and pluralist Iraq, as exemplified in the areas that are not run by Saddam Hussein. So knowing that we're going to have to decide on a post-Saddam Iraq anyway.
Does democracy matter? Jordan is the same freedom score as Turkey.
I'd say
Not really.
It depends on the
Not all
type
the
of
time.
democracy. Depends on the type of democracy. If we're talking liberal democracy, no. Liberal democracy is a lie anyway.
And that's the thing. This is also at the time in that same document I was talking about earlier with the chemical weapons. They also have some Al Qaeda intelligence in there that's declassified stuff that I already knew about. But so they're specifically talking, and also this is in the video, the Iraq War video we did. Like I put it in screen in inserts if you want to actually look it up as well. But the guys in Al Qaeda, like the current emir of Al Qaeda, is there talking about how the main thing Al Qaeda needs to be doing is supporting the elections in Iraq. Ask yourself why Al Qaeda's main goal in 2004 was making sure the elections in Iraq happened.
Accelerationism.
That's part of it.
That's
part
my
of
guess.
it.
Well, Al Qaeda are
Part
by
of it.
themselves accelerationists to begin with.
They were betting on the Islamist parties to win.
No, they knew exactly who was going to win. That was the point.
They knew it meant conflict.
Exactly. Exactly. They knew that the Shia majority was going to win, and they knew that it was going to shift to an Iranian proxy after that. And they knew that from there that the Iranians are the basically they bet on the Sunni resistance fighters feeling threatened by a US backed Shia government that just took out a Sunni, right? So they just took out a Sunni majority government, and then so that's what these people are worried about, and that's the fact is that you cannot have the type of democracy Iraq has that we set up. At the same time, the Iraqi resistance and Joe Biden said that we need to divide Iraq into 3 separate states, and they were 100% right. And that's the thing I was talking about earlier is the ability to not make nations within states. Like imagine Iraq is set up like the UAE, right? Objectively better. That's the same way it's a confederalist type system. It's the same way that a lot of tribal governments are set up. Each tribe has a representative, right? Why would you not do that for Iraq if you're going to do any type of democracy? Al-Qaeda is more democratic than a lot of the democracies that like we back in the world.
Yeah. All right.
What are the alternatives? Are we in fact already at war or not? I would say there's merely a truce at the moment in what's been a very long quarrel with the Saddam Hussein regime. It would be far better to have a public and democratic argument about how best to condition the post-Saddam situation. And in my view, the best way to do that is to say we are firmly on the side of his foes and his enemies, and we want for Iraq what they want. And that supplies a standard by which the administration can be judged if for any reason it doesn't live up to it. So it means the critique.
Chris, that's where you fucked up. Everyone was his enemy. That's where you fucked up. That was a mistake. When you say that, you're talking about Iran. Iran was Saddam's biggest enemy. Like fucking, and also when he was talking about who was gonna help after Kuwait, Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda was there being like, "We'll do it." Like, come on, guys, you had the help.
Can go on even if the intervention is in the military sense successful.
So
what don't you like about the new Afghanistan? What don't you like about
the new Afghanistan, Christopher? It's very
Maybe that it's run by like the criminals that the people turn to the Taliban to like overthrow to begin with.
Simple. The United States is
all this is aging like milk.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's serious development. It's serious peacekeeping. It's the U.S. command.
Like, it's just so funny because we objectively did the worst things possible in Afghanistan. Like the first thing we did was go up to the guys Iran was backing and be like, who should we bomb? How do you think that worked out? Do you know the amount of people that they said arrest this guy? He's Al Qaeda. They weren't. It was never Al Qaeda.
It says it's buffered. Why is it not playing?
United States in post-conflict situations, and the record is terrible.
But you'd be making the case. You would surely, therefore, be making the case. In fact, you just were for more intervention or better intervention rather than less. Come on, listen to your own argument. No. The fact is, the population of Afghanistan has gone up by 1.5 million of its citizens who want to come back. Don't forget the 4 million Iraqis forced to live outside their country who also have the right of return. And the condition of at least 50% of the population, those of the feminine gender, is obviously improved. It's no longer the headquarters of a lethal conspiracy. That's not bad for years ago.
I don't disagree with Christopher that
that all sounds like hard-headed and realistic and practical. But in fact, it's extraordinarily utopian. I mean, do you not agree with me that the implosion of the Saddam Hussein regime is coming? That you will either have to face a collapsed and imploded Iraq with or without a policy very soon. Now, to say that there will be innumerable difficulties here, as there are in Afghanistan, seems to me to be no more than trite.
United Nations forces coming there to liberate them.
I'm saying that in the only place where opinion can be tested without fear or without coercion, it's practically unanimous. I wouldn't presume to speak for the citizens of Baghdad, and I actually don't think probably David Reef should do so either. But we know that there's a very large Shia slum belt population around Baghdad, where Saddam City, it's called rather insultingly, where such opinion has been tested, seems very hostile to the regime. As I said earlier, there are 4 million Iraqis forced to live outside their country. We have a very, very good idea of what they think. I believe they have the right of return, by the way. There's a very, very strong indication that a regime, furthermore, that insists on 100% turnout and 100% vote isn't very sure of its popular base.
Okay, but there is an obvious point that you well know, which is that on the one hand, you can wish a regime would be overthrown. Another is to wish that somebody would come and bomb your homeland in order to overthrow the regime. Those are two very different points.
No, but these people.
That is a fire point. That is a fire point right there. That is the big difference.
I like how he's immediately like, nope. Like, oh boy.
But that's a great point, you know?
No, it's
And-
fantastic. Go on.
I'm saying these people say they wish that a regime change would come, and they believe it can.
Wishing a regime
you're
change
muted.
would come and wishing to be bombed are different things. That's not what he asked, buddy.
Be conditioned from outside. Now, that wouldn't give the United States the right on its own, of course. You have to prove at least 3 or 4 other things, I believe. One, that Iraq is
The
a threat to
US
its
doesn't have
neighbors,
the right,
again, which
period.
it certainly
Fucking
is,
idiot.
would be if it wasn't forcibly disarmed, even more so. Third, and I wish there was more emphasis on this, the evidence that Saddam Hussein should be tried for crimes against humanity, war crimes, and under the Genocide Convention need only be taken off the shelf. We have all the files necessary for that arraignment. I think it's to the disgrace of the US government that it doesn't make use of them and say that that's another warrant that it's executing. That's unfortunately because it doesn't agree with the International War Crimes Tribunal, and indeed until today appointed for its own investigative commission someone who would also be hunted by it.
That's because we believe that Iraq could prosecute their own war crimes. That's why. We don't need to issue that warrant. We issued a warrant against Putin because we know that Russia can't prosecute its own war crimes. Like, that was the whole point of that. It's also an intimidation tactic. Like, let's be honest why it's happening. But there's a difference there is the point.
I'm sorry, I can't speak for the administration. And then there's the question, which Dr. Coe seems to be underestimated, of the connection between Saddam Hussein and international gangsterism. Last weekend, Saddam Hussein.
International gangsterism. What do you think he means by that?
I was thinking something like the Andrada, but like, no, what the fuck? He's not like an international drug dealer, right? He's what?
Well, it's like he said in his previous videos, he doesn't like that Saddam has all this oil monopoly control, but I'm going to go ahead and get real SJW with it. I think he's just racist. I think he sees like this Arab guy and a lot of power, and even though he is objectively a bad person, he associates him with gangsterism or whatever. Because if you've seen any of Hitchens' other videos, like, let's be real, the guy is not exactly like have the fondest thoughts about Arab and Muslim people. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say that that's like his Orientalist brain talking.
They made a speech calling.
How can you say the word Orientalist when this is
That was the wrong
screen?
word. I'm sorry, that was the wrong word.
For a common front of jihad with the Al Qaeda forces in Kuwait against the British, the Americans, and the Jews.
Well, Chris,
that's the day he hands over the documents.
We're still waiting.
He's the man who organized the. Abu Nidal.
I feel like his entire crusade is
listen
based
to
on
this
his
about Kuwait.
Common front
anti-religion.
of jihad with the Al Qaeda forces in Kuwait against the British. Estimated of the connection between Saddam Hussein and international gangsterism. Last weekend, Saddam Hussein made a speech calling for a common front of jihad with the Al Qaeda forces in Kuwait against the British, the Americans, and the Jews.
Well, Chris,
that's the day.
You know that SpongeBob meme with Squidward where it's like, we're gonna kill you? That was Al Qaeda to Saddam at that point. Like, he was calling for a common front with Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda is literally the whole goal of Al Qaeda is to kill Saddam. Like, that is their central goal. That's what you need to understand about Al Qaeda more than anything.
Hey, he hands over the documents.
We're still waiting.
He's the man who organized the Abu Nidal network. Yes, but you won't have to wait all that long, and all the pieces.
Wait. Can you expand on that for other people?
The Iraqi Ba'ath Party and the Al Qaeda network.
Expand on the Al Qaeda wanting to kill Saddam bit for popularity.
So we talk about this a lot in a lot of our episodes. Ace articulates it a lot better, but basically he says that like a lot of these people who, especially in the Egyptian front, like they were unhappy with how their countries were going, right? And why were the countries going this way? Because of nationalism, right? So if you think about Al Qaeda, they are a very internationalist thinking type of organization, right? And you look at people like Saladin, right? And it's like the unifying force of Islam back then to like fight off like the entire like Christian empire. Like that's the type of history you have, and they're trying to replace it with a fascistic nationalist style. So a lot of these people naturally believed that it was a better direction to use Islam to be the unifying force here, right? So you naturally develop into these groups that get more accelerationist over time.
Yeah, and again, perfect, like literally explained perfectly by John. And just to add on top of that, Saddam, like every other kind of like Arab nationalist dictator, threw a lot of his Islamist opponents in like really fucked up, dreary, like disgusting prisons. And their buddies and the ones who were fortunate enough to get out were, understandably pissed about it.
But Saddam, especially, it comes a lot from the Shia side as well. But the thing is that what's also interesting, and I'm going to end this part here because because I wanted to set the groundwork for what the actual arguments going in were. So when we look at modern day Kurdicisms, in part 2 of this video, but anyway, what was I just saying? So Al Qaeda in Iraq, right? So uh Zarqawi, right? Zarqawi, this. I've heard you talk about this, James. He goes back to like 97, right? So we know he's in Afghanistan. We know he meets Osama bin Laden in 97, right? And he tells Osama bin Laden he should be running Al Qaeda. That Osama bin Laden doesn't know what he's doing. This guy can't read. By all accounts that we know, he cannot even read. And he claims to have memorized the Quran, right? And people would say that they would see him in jail, like reading the Quran in his cell and crying. And I'm just thinking, he's crying because he can't actually read, So like this dude is actually like a gangster though, but his philosophy is to exterminate the Shia and that they're heretics, right? Al Qaeda was never about that. So the thing is that they told him to fuck off, right? They gave him money and gave him a camp, and he started training in like chemical weapons, right? And the whole thing is that Al Qaeda didn't like him, and he came to Iraq and he was able to weaponize all this stuff. And actually, Al Qaeda was trying to prevent the civil war from happening. They actually didn't want it to spiral into a civil war either. So Al-Qaeda is a really complex organization in that regard. And like I said before, Kurdish Al-Qaeda, the exact quote is complicated, but he says something like, I see Al-Qaeda as Lenin before the revolution, the Zionists before the state of Israel, as in Al-Qaeda is a revolutionary force, right? When nobody was giving the Syrian people guns to defend themselves, who came? Al-Qaeda. When nobody was giving the Libyan people guns, who came? Al-Qaeda. Right? So there's an argument to be made that you have to contextualize this in the same group that killed 3,000 people in 9/11, all to do it, all to get the US pissed enough that they would be blinded into taking out regime after regime, and they almost completed all of it too. They just have one asshole left in Syria. Like Al-Qaeda are master technicians. They are so fucking smart. And if you think about it, like when we talk about like the shadow governments that like control things like Illuminatis and stuff like that, that's what I really respect about Al-Qaeda, is that it's just like a handful of people, maybe 20 guys, and they had so much influence on the world over 20 years. It's amazing what they were able to do. And at the same time, they're kind of like chaotic evil, because they're like accelerationists. They believe that a better world will be built in the ashes, but they also see things like Saddam purging, like they would do that. They would get control and they would purge people to maintain control because they know that it works, because that's how dictatorships maintain control. So Al-Qaeda actually took the time to have plans of what came after these regimes as well. It's just that they were foolish to think that you could control another country, just like America. They are just as foolish as America. They're just imperialist as America. They're all the same.
That's a good end.
I just want to get into one more thing, and I've harped on it like almost every episode I'm on. But again, Zarqawi would not have become the guy he became if he hadn't been like put in Jordanian prison and been allowed to intermingle with people with is militant Islamist mindsets, ideology and things like that, and put through probably God knows how much torture and humiliation and whatever, like every other major figure in Al Qaeda and ISIS. I'm just gonna keep like making that point every time it comes up, just because like it needs to be like really understood. Is that it's just the prisons in Arab countries are like hugely responsible for creating this mess, insanely responsible.
Wait, what do you guys think of the possibility of prison reform on like KSA in Egypt and Iraq?
Well,
I'd like to see more results from Saudi Arabia specifically. I hear good things, but hearing and seeing are different things.
They seem to be doing good. It's a little odd. Like I remember I was reading one article where a guy went to go visit one of these prison camps, and he was not prisons where it's like more like prison reform. It's more like about reform than punishing these like.
They actually made a documentary, I heard, as well.
They might have, but he was talking to one guy that they taught how to like. He was like this former Islamist militant. They taught how to like do graphic design and like video editing and all this computer shit. And he was talking about like. He was the guy who was interviewing him, like the guy he was talking to was talking about like, yeah, it's great, man, like it's awesome, I'm learning all this new shit with computers, like I'm gonna have a skill set once I'm out of here, yada yada yada. But the guy who was interviewing him like mentions kind of as a side note, he's like, I don't think he even believes himself, like he really wants to be out there doing jihad stuff. But
and also to comment on what I said before, the article we have on child soldiers, some of the source material we have in this, it was specifically about de-radicalizing these girls, right? And like how to like children that grew up as a child soldier in warfare and like what life comes after. And this is something that parallels today with the Kurds. That's one of the main criticisms that you hear about them is the child soldiers, right? But the TPLF in the most recent war, like both sides of that war were using child soldiers, but the TPLF, they still have a continuation of this old policy. But it's like it's no question that when the TPLF gained control, they did have a tyrannical regime there, But like when they were revolutionary at that first generation, it was like extremely comparable to a lot of the ideas that you do see in Kurdistan and like other socialist things, because you see a lot of socialist revolutionaries have these ideas of equality, and similar to Robespierre at the time, and sometimes it really worked out in a lot of places, and then countries come in and they interfere and they fuck it all up for people. It's kind of hard to plan your economy when other people are fucking with your economy,